I am excited to introduce today's presenters. Greg Zaguda is mStoner's most senior technical consultant and head of our analytics practice and application development consultant since 1994. Greg has experience that spans the technology spectrum. He's provided technical leadership and project management on software teams for projects from e-commerce websites to business intelligence implementation. And Chris Lucas is the vice president of marketing at FormStack. He is passionate about finding new ways to drive web traffic and leads. At FormStack, Chris focuses on interweaving smart web marketing with overall product vision to build an ever-growing user base. So don't forget to use the hashtag mStonerNow during today's presentation. And of course, you can tweet us individually. You can see our Twitter handles up on the screen. I'm going to be quiet now, turn off my microphone and my camera. And Greg and Chris, let's get started. I'll turn the session over to you two.
All right, thanks, Mallory. It's good to have everyone joining us today and to talk a little bit about forms and how they get used in higher ed. So we've got an agenda laid out for what we want to cover today. We're going to start off with a little bit of a discussion around the problems around forms and how they're used in higher ed, the ways that these happen on our projects. And a lot of that comes from our experience at mStoner working with clients on website projects and how forms get considered. Then Chris is going to spend a little time talking about some of the problems, brand problems, conversion problems, the things that we're trying to achieve by having forms on the web, and then transition to some of the solutions, some of the things that we've seen folks in higher ed use that help with some of those things. And then we'll round out the session with a couple of examples of institutions that have used some of these things to solve some of their problems with web forms on their site. So we'll detail a couple of those. And then, as Mallory mentioned, we'll round out our session with time for questions. So I want to start off talking about form usage in higher ed. Again, this is based on experience working on dozens of projects with different types of institutions, community colleges and large universities. A lot of higher ed has, everyone has a big website, a lot of pages. And we also have some of the same needs for collecting information from the visitors to the site. We know in these web projects, there's a lot of discussion about the audiences and how different they are. And we want to serve those audiences in different ways. And forms are one way that we do that and collect information. So wanted to talk a little bit about some of the problems web managers encounter with forms on web projects. And for me, especially in my role, a lot of this starts with the technology. There are a variety of different pieces of technology in web projects on campuses. And then, as we know, there's technology that exists kind of outside the website with other systems, enterprise systems, learning management systems, et cetera. So there are potentially a lot of pieces to the puzzle. But the core pieces that are part of every web project, a website redesign or kind of that public-facing website, are the place I wanted to start. And usually that discussion starts with the content management system. So when we talk to folks about their website project and how things are going, usually the first piece of technology that gets mentioned is the CMS. And whether it's something open source like Drupal or it's a commercial system like Cascade Server or Terminal 4, we've got a variety of different needs we're trying to meet with that system to publish a lot of content out to the web. And so that's a big piece of what we think about in terms of technology when we think about the website. But there are a few other things that also come into play pretty much on every website, kind of regardless of the external systems you may have, there's enterprise systems. The first of those is website search. So sometimes website search is provided by the content management system, and sometimes folks are using a Google custom search, Google site search, search appliance. But search is something we have to account for and consider, and is almost always part of a website redesign project that we're dealing with. Another thing along those lines is web event calendaring. So sometimes we have event content managed in the CMS, but probably more typically, it's in a separate system where owners of event content can publish that information into a system. Sometimes it's tied to resource scheduling, a bit of software for the campus, and then that information can get published to the website. And so we want to consider that piece of technology. Analytics is a big interest of mine, and also an important part of a website project when we want to learn about how the website's doing, how can we make it better. So analytics is another software piece that goes into that, a technology piece. And kind of last but not least are the forms. When we do website redesign projects, there's a lot of talk about information architecture and how things are going to go into the content management system. And sometimes lost in the shuffle a little bit are the forms and how those things are going to work. Sometimes we have forms out on our websites that were created by a programmer who's left the institution, and so we've got this thing out there on a server, and are we just going to link to it on the new website? Can we move it into the content management system? What do we do with some of this stuff? So a lot of times people feel like they can launch a new website. We need to have a content management system. We have to have search. We have to have web event calendaring and analytics. But the forms, we sometimes are just inheriting something we already have and trying to carry forward with that, and that's not always the best solution. Another thing that comes up with the technology around our websites is when we talk to stakeholders about putting forms online. When I'm on campus doing discovery and intake on a new web project, it's not uncommon for people to talk about how we have forms online or we want to put forms online. And it's surprising how often what that means is a PDF. That we have a PDF that someone can download, or maybe it's a fillable PDF where they can fill it out and then email it to us. It gets printed, it gets faxed, it gets distributed all over the place. But that's not really what we want to talk about with forms today. 15 years ago, that was a really big thing to be able to distribute that online. But we want to go beyond that. We want something that's truly an online form. With PDFs, we see that old forms are often not removed from the website, especially in a redesign project. When you're looking at your existing content, it's easy to see 5 or 6 or 7 versions of a form that has evolved over time that are still available on the website. So you're not always linked to them, but sometimes they're found in searches. And likewise, we can get search results that are filled with pages, with PDFs instead of web pages. We had a recent example with a liberal arts college admission site where there's a PDF that we knew from using our analytics that was the 12th most viewed piece of content on the site, and that's a PDF instead of a web page. And it's kind of a missed opportunity when you're talking about forms and conversions and being able to collect information from our visitors without them printing something out. So what are the ways that we solve these problems in higher ed? I think there are 3 main technology solutions that get considered when we're talking about forms. The first of these is to use a form capability in the content management system. So depending on the system you use, sometimes there's something built in, sometimes there's an optional module or plugin. Sometimes it has a cost and sometimes it's included. But these tools work directly in your content management system. So there's an advantage there to being able to create a form directly in the system and that you're using to create your content. But our experience is that these typically don't have the best ease of use for content editors. So it's not as easy to create a form in a content management system as it is to edit pages of content. And oftentimes the features of those tools are somewhat limited. We're talking about relatively simple forms that send an email, or maybe they write a little bit of content to a database that you can then get out later. But they don't do other types of integration. They don't do multiple page forms very well, or conditional logic, or validation of form fields, some of the other things that really make the usability of a form, something that our site visitors are going to expect. But CMS-based form tools are one way that we see folks solve this problem. Another approach is to kind of go to the other end of the spectrum and develop something totally custom. And these are a lot of those legacy forms that we see inherited, where someone wrote an online application or a request information form or a giving form. A software developer wrote it, maybe in IT or in a web development group. But if they're not around, or we don't have someone who knows about that technology, we just sort of inherit it and keep it, because this is the type of activity that requires a web developer to build. So we can build virtually anything we want this way, but it takes resources to do it. And typically, the content editors or the owners of the form data, the submissions that are going to happen, won't have access to change the form or make improvements to it without help from a web developer, unless we build that access, right? So maybe we can build a utility to help us change the the values in a drop-down list on a form, or change other aspects of the form. But we need to be able to do that without breaking the programming behind the form. A lot of times these custom web forms work with or require back-end solutions. So, we need a database to store the data, or maybe we're putting the data into another system. And so content editors need access to those other pieces to be able to complete their work. And changes in one place can impact changes in the other. So the bottom line with custom web forms is they really have to be, all the features have to be built from the ground up. So this is an advantage if you have the resources to do it, and you have really custom requirements. But the drawback is that we're really relying on a specialized skill set to be able to do this. So historically, I think in higher ed, there are a lot of these sorts of forms that have been taken on, and then they just get cast year after year because the level of investment to update them or change them is high. Sometimes we don't even know who to go to for help with that. So a third way that institutions solve problems around forms is increasingly around these best-of-breed forms tools. So a third-party software tool, it's typically web-based, that allows us to create forms. And the nice thing about these tools, from my perspective, is they offer administrative tools and utilities so that we can manage the forms. We can create forms, but we can also manage the submission results, the data that we get out of it. And those don't have to be built from scratch. They're pretty well-refined tools that we can use on every form that we have, where in a custom model, we would have to build those utilities. These sorts of form tools have options for how forms are hosted on pages. So, they can be, we can use JavaScript, we can have a hosted web form where we link off to the web form. There are more than one way to include these in pages. And folks who have worked in content management systems have probably struggled with how we kind of integrate things and make things look like one website when we have forms or other content coming from different places. And these sorts of tools are built from the ground up to make form creation easy for content editors. So we want to be able to web-enable business processes with these forms, but do it in a decentralized way, like we do with our content management system, where we allow people to enter content for their area of the website. And really the best way this works is when there's a tool that's built exclusively for that. And that's where the custom web forms don't allow us to do that unless we have a really skilled developer who can build something like that. And the CMS tools just don't quite have the ease of use, in my view, that a custom built from the ground up tool has for that sort of thing. And then we can also take advantage of advanced features like integration with other systems, whether it's giving, payment processing, putting data into other databases and formats, and then things like branding and analytics features that allow us to get the most out of the forms that we have. There's really a wide range of features that can be applied to a lot of different forms with these sorts of tools. So that's the third way that we see people at institutions solving their issues with forms. So we have these three different possibilities. We've got CMS-based form tools. We have just totally custom-built from the ground up forms. And then we have these best-of-breed third-party form tools that we can plug into the website. And when institutions think about these and make decisions about it, these are the things that all those decisions sort of boil down to for me. The first is self-serviceability for content editors. Content editors need to be able to do some of this stuff themselves. It needs to be easy enough to do that we aren't relying on technical folks on the web team to build every form that's needed on campus. And that ties into the technical support. Who's going to support it? If we have developers who can do this stuff, then they may provide technical support. If it's a third-party forms tool or CMS tool, somewhere we need to get the support we need, especially for mission-critical business processes that are going to be carried out via forms. There's an increase in higher ed websites being hosted externally. So, 10 or 15 years ago, it was most common to have your website, your content management system, all those things hosted on campus. And increasingly, all those things are going to the cloud. And so institutions' comfort level with that and what they're doing with their other systems has an impact on, what sort of systems are plugging in and where they are. And then it all comes down to cost versus capabilities. What's the external cost? What sort of internal resources and costs do we have there? And what are the capabilities we get from those things? And that's how these sorts of form tool decisions get made. So I'm going to let Chris talk a little bit about some of the specific problems in higher ed around branded conversions.
Yeah, so Greg, I think you did a great job of kind of outlining kind of where we are today and kind of how do education organizations make decisions, right, on how do they create a better form experience. And really, when we're talking about forms, we're talking about points of conversion, whether it's an inquiry, whether it's alumni donation, or anything like that. And one of the things that we see at FormStack, and one of the things that we see with our customers, is this issue around brand, right? And so, and as you guys know, Greg, you guys spend a lot of time working with customers on creating really great brand experiences. Because when you think about universities and people coming to university websites, one of the things the most prestigious about them is their brand, right? They want to present really good kind of experience in the front end. And so what we'll often see is we see large amounts of marketing dollars spent on brand on the front end website and on that front end experience. And often what happens is when you look at points of conversion, when you look at somebody who you're asking for a lead inquiry or a donation or whatever it is, you send them into this really nice branded experience on the front end, and then you have these forms, whether PDF, like you said, or kind of CMS tools that are built out on the CMS side. And you often have this really kind of what I call brand degradation experience, right? So you've got this really nice front end, and then you go to a form or a point of conversion, and that branding is lost. And so what often happens is you have you have this lost user experience. And so what happens is you've got confusion, right? So is this really the place that I'm supposed to be, right? So what happens is you've got a landing page, you've got a form, the form is unbranded, and suddenly the end user is wondering, is this the process that I'm supposed to be running through? If you think about really good online experiences, whether it's an e-commerce experience or whatever it is, those branding elements is kind of follow through the process. So you go on the front end, you go through the middle part, there's always that form of branding that tells you, hey, this is an indicator that I'm doing the right steps, right? That I'm doing the right things. As I'm giving you my information, these are the things that I'm supposed to be, or this is the path that I'm supposed to be following. So then what often happens after that confusion is kind of uncertainty and low confidence, right? When you talk about, especially in this day and age, when you talk about confidence in somebody providing their information to you, whether you're higher educational or higher ed institution or otherwise, people are very sensitive about who they give their information to. And when you have this kind of unbranded experience on that form conversion side, often what happens is you see high abandonment rates because they either don't know if this is the right path that they're supposed to be headed down, or they don't know if it is a trusted resource, right? Oftentimes you get, whether it's a PDF or kind of an unbranded CMS or whatever that form is, you don't really know if it's really tied, if it's a third-party system, if it's tied to that organization. If you see a funky URL or if you see something that's quite off, you'll often have kind of this low confidence or this uncertainty in, do I trust this experience or not? And so that's what often happens in the brand perspective and when you have brand fragmentation like that. So ultimately what that means is you lose out in inquiry, you lose out in conversion opportunity. And really as higher ed institutions, as digital marketers, what we're tasked with is getting more inquiries, right? We're tasked with how do we get more, and brand plays a huge role in that. And I don't know how many times I've heard that across customers of ours where they just are looking for a solution that can really kind of help increase their brand. And so there are really two ways to help do this way. One is to create branded forms, and so you can do that with kind of like you talked about the best of breed form building solutions, or you can do it with embedding forms on your website. What's nice about embedding forms on your website and looking for tools that have those capabilities is you don't lose any of that experience. You're not redirected to a third-party site. You're not redirected anywhere. Embedding forms on a website allows you to carry out that brand experience that you work so hard. The form lives right there on your website, and people have that engaging experience just like they would, whether if they're using a third-party system. They have that engaging experience on your website right then and there. That conversion happens right there on the website, and so those are two easy ways that you can leverage that brand to increase conversion. continuing kind of down the conversion path, I guess, not to include any puns or anything like that, but one of the things that we look at from a form stack side is forms are really a point of conversion, right? And when you think about online forms, you should really think about them as ways that you want to convert your website visitors. And this is something that form or that PDF forms can't do, right? A PDF form is not a very flexible solution. So one of the things that we did earlier this year at FormStack is we went through and we surveyed over 400,000 users, and we came up with a form conversion report. And in that report, there's a bunch of different opportunities to increase conversions through online forms. And one of the things that we found, and one of the things I want to share today, was different types of forms affect the way that people engage or convert on your forms. And so what I mean by that is, as we looked at it, contact forms were one of the lowest converting types of forms. And if you look at surveys or contest forms, they're one of the higher converting forms. And you think about a contact form is very passive, right? How many times are you just kind of scrolling through a website, you see a contact form, and you're just like, hey, I should fill this out, right? There's no real compelling reason other than you just want to give your information to somebody if you're having or just using a contact form. And so one of the things that form builders and kind of third-party apps like FormStack can help do is create the right form for the right situation. So as we looked at it, and we said that, as the stat shows, contests and surveys are two of the more higher engaged, higher converting forms. Excuse me. And one of the reasons, or I think there are two reasons for that. One, contest forms and surveys are very targeted. So if you think about a contest that you're running, or you think about a survey that you're running, you know the target market, right? For a survey, you say, I want to engage this type of audience. I need these types of responses. And so you know how to go out and how to reach them. Same thing with contests. Contests are very highly engaging forms, and they're highly shareable. Both of these forms are. And so what you get are conversion opportunities through different types of forms that normally you would put up a contact form on a landing page and say, hey, fill out this information, or fill out this form, get the information that you need. If you think about using forms in a much more compelling way, in much more of a way that we think about using content, right? Contests and surveys are great pieces of content for you. They're great pieces of, or they're great ways to get people to give you information and you to give them information back, but do it in a way that's much different than just a simple contact form. So it's about thinking about what is the right form for the right time. And it's going beyond the contact form. It's going beyond the PDF form. It's saying, how do we leverage form capabilities and the technology that is now available to us to find the right form for the right people at the right time. And that's really what, as you're thinking about conversion opportunities, that's really what you're thinking about. Which kind of brings me to the next point on when you talk about content, we look at, and we kind of encourage our customers to think about your whole form as a piece of content. And that goes all the way to the submit button, right? Oftentimes when we think about how do we better our conversion rates, we often think about the form fields or what are the questions that we ask. We often forget about a simple button on the form, and it's that last piece of engagement that you have on your form. And so in that same form conversion report, we found that changing a button, that submit button on your form, can have huge impact on conversion rates. So you think about the most popular is submit form, but really think about submit is just like a contact form. It's very passive. What you want to think through and what you should find in your form solution is the capabilities to test these elements, right? Submit form, if you look at a higher converting, or the highest conversion, it was submit registration. It's a little bit more impactful. It's telling you what are you trying, or what are you doing with that once you hit submit, right? And so what you want to do with your submit buttons in ways that you can increase conversion rate is provide action steps, right? How do you provide information on that submit button that tells the end user, what am I doing once I hit submit? What is the information that I'm going to receive? So sign up for our newsletter, enter the contest, receive white paper, whatever that information that you're going to give back to them, create a compelling action on that submit button, and you'll start to see conversion rates rise. And again, this is, when we're talking about all of these things, it's about utilizing the technologies that are out there. You kind of talked about the best of breed, right? And it's about utilizing the technologies and the best of breed in these solutions to really amplify your marketing efforts to these conversion efforts. So that's really two things that I think are overlooked there when we talk about kind of submit buttons and types of forms in terms of conversion rates or conversion opportunities. So some other simple tools that can help, excuse me. When we're talking about other tools that can help, we're talking about simple tools that reduce friction, right? So when you're providing an online form or an online conversion opportunity, what we're really trying to do to increase those conversions is reduce the friction for the end user. And one of the simplest ways that you can do, just like we talked about the type of form, we have a feature, it's called Facebook, it's a Facebook tab embed. When we talk about serving the right form at the right time, using something like a Facebook tab embed is about serving the right form at the right time at the right place, right? And so you think about, again, marketing efforts. A lot of our marketing efforts happen where we're trying to drive people to Facebook because a lot of engagement is happening on Facebook. We're driving a lot of inquiries through Facebook. But if you think about the next step, oftentimes what happens? You drive a big campaign to Facebook and you have something on Facebook and it says, to enter, click this link, and you send them away to a different landing page, right? That's a very confusing path for the end user. If you can utilize technologies like a Facebook tab embed, you can embed the form right there on your Facebook tab. And then you have that conversion opportunity where the visit is happening, where the engagement is happening, and where the user is going for that information. And so that's one of the features that you should look for, try to leverage as a way to increase conversions. The other feature is social autofill. So just like you put the right form at the right place at the right time, social autofill is a feature that allows you to pre-fill information using social data. So really what the advantage is, and again, we're talking about reducing friction, right? The advantage for technology like social autofill is that you get a lot of the cumbersome, a lot of the innate or the kind of the boring data out of the way, right? You get the name, you get the profile information, email address, phone number, whatever it is that's in that social profile, and you get to the meat of the form. So if you think about a survey, right, you're really not after somebody's name and email address and phone number. What you're really after is their responses. And if you can use technology like social autofill, what you get is you get all of that kind of primary data out of the way. And you get the user's mind not thinking on what's my name, what's my email, what's my phone. You get them to think about the responses that they're giving you. And so leveraging these types of technologies, again, go to reducing friction on the user side and allows you to kind of move past the mundane data collection and get the data that you really want. And then finally, we have field bottlenecks. So when we're talking about, we've got these really great branded forms. We're thinking about our content. Our submit button is content, right? We're thinking about ways that we can introduce the right form at the right time to the right people. How do we start to analyze this? And if you leverage technologies that are out there like FormStack or like others, what you want to find are some opportunities to reduce friction. And where do you find that? You find that in what we call field bottlenecks. And field bottlenecks basically take a look at the form and say, where are people converting and where are they dropping off? And so if you have a 10-field question or a 10-question survey, you can see, maybe after field 6, people are dropping off. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to think differently about, should I have a 6-field form? Should I have a 5-field form? How do I start to begin to test these theories, right? And again, as digital marketers, we're tasked with how do we get more leads? How do we get more information or how do we get more inquiries, right? And so really what we're trying to do with some of these features is trying to reduce the friction. And then if we can identify those friction points with something like field bottlenecks, we can start to create a much better converting opportunity. And so again, as digital marketers, we spend a lot of time on our marketing channels and trying to drive traffic and driving inquiries. But if we aren't thinking about those conversion points, and is our form branded, or do we have an embedded form? Do we have the right kind of call to action for people to give me information? And do I really understand where people are falling off on my form? If you can start to put that together, and you should be able to start to be able to put that together, it's a huge win for digital marketers. And if you think about what we were doing 10 years ago with PDFs, none of this stuff was available, right? And so we've got a smarter digital marketer, we've got smarter ways to drive traffic and smarter ways to convert traffic off of that.
All right, thanks, Chris. So I'm going to dive into an example of an institution that tackled some of these problems, specifically the PDF, which you'll see in a second, at Berkshire Community College, which is located in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. They've got about 3,000 day and evening students, plus another 5,000 students taking non-credit offerings. And mStoner worked with them this year on a website redesign project, which included a new content management system. So they moved to a different system, which was kind of our big technology piece there. And then in the course of working on that project, we came across this form problem that they had. So this is their application form, which was a 4-page PDF that all applications to the institution were moving through. And so we determined as the project progressed that it was really important to move this form to be an online form. You know, we needed a way to collect this information online. Of course, it's an application, so there's an existing business process around how this works that we wanted to improve and impact and ultimately get the data into their DataTel colleague system, which wasn't going to change as part of this. So we wanted to explore some options and make this part of the website redesign, launch with a new website with a new online application form. So we looked at the options and kind of came down to these two as the best way to approach this. You know, first the thinking was this is really a custom web form. It'll allow us to customize this the way we need to meet all the requirements, which we'll talk about in a minute. We knew we wanted to connect the form to that DataTel backend, so we needed to collect the right information to go in there, collect it in the right format that was going to work to make that business process easy. And we knew if we did a custom web form, we could put that data directly into DataTel. And we'd have to use server-side code to help deliver these features. So it's pretty heavy, you know, technical lift to do, but we knew we could do all the things that needed to happen to do that. The other option we considered is to use a custom form stack form. So using the form stack platform, we could inherit the administrative tools to allow us to review submissions and look at the data before we move it into the backend system. We wanted to be able to use a platform to create additional forms. So the online application form is a start, but it wasn't the only PDF out on the website that was kind of in need of this treatment. And this option would let us do less code, you know, less technical code, and more configuration and customization, taking advantage of some of the features and opportunities that Chris outlined. And so these are the options that we were considering and trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to make this happen? And we wanted to also meet a set of solution requirements. So the solution in particular was going to be a form that had multiple pages. The PDF is 4 pages and includes some information about the application process, but also a bunch of fields that needed to be filled out. The online form we intended to have more steps, so we could divide up something that's sort of ominous looking, if it's all on one screen or just a handful of screens, and divide it up. We wanted to have conditional steps because there's some questions on an application, as most know, that depending on the answer to one question, we have another question we need to ask you. And on the PDF, people filled out the relevant portions, and sometimes they had mistakes with that. So we wanted to be able to use conditional steps in the form to build something that's a little bit more tailored to the answers that the applicant's giving as they move through. We wanted it to be mobile friendly. It's a new, you know, responsive website that Berkshire was building, so they wanted this form to be responsive as well. We needed to have required field validations and ensure we had good data. So since the idea is this data goes into DataTel, there's specific field requirements for some of the information that goes in. We've got personal information, we have phone numbers, we have all kinds of detailed information that needs to be formatted correctly so that it can be used on the back end. And we didn't want to have to clean up that data. And then we needed to have this step for admissions to approve submissions. So it became important to us to not put data directly into DataTel. We didn't want anything that wasn't clean or reviewed by the admissions team to make it into the system. And so based on these requirements, we decided that the FormStack platform, as the basis for this form was the best way to meet all the requirements and get this done and ready for launch. So one of the things that decision did, it's freed us up to really spend time on the design process. So rather than writing a bunch of code, we were focused on designing a form that met all our requirements and was really going to be usable, something that applicants would be able to handle and tackle and not run into problems with, and certainly would be easier than that PDF. So we started reviewing that PDF form, looking at those conditional questions that we would have where the answer to one question impacts another, and outlining what the forks in the road were going to be. And we developed a really detailed wireframe that proposed the new steps, step-by-step for the form, and the fields on each form, based on the new website design. And I'll show you a couple of those shots in a second. Then it allowed us to develop the HTML and CSS we needed to theme the form, so we could inherit the styles from the website redesign and apply those to the FormStack platform as a theme. And then we also had time to do some quality assurance with the web team and the admissions team prior to launch. So as part of the design process, we could include all the parties who needed to have a say in how this works, what this experience is going to be like, and also make sure that we're getting the right information the right way. And so this is a shot of one of the wireframes. We call these sort of medium fidelity wireframes, where they were all black and white, so we weren't trying to design the page, but we were taking fonts and language and logo and elements of the page and putting them together in a way that will let us evaluate what this experience is going to be like. We took a mobile-first approach to the form, so you can see that this first page just has a handful of fields on it. So there's far more than this that we needed to complete an application, but this allowed us to get started with that. And we took this wireframe process forward throughout all the steps of the process. So ultimately, we ended up with 42 different states, different wires that were drawn as part of the wireframe. So this is an example of one of those forks in the road, the high school status. Do you have a high school diploma or an equivalent? And then based on the answer to that question, we could present two different options with the follow-up, the appropriate follow-up. And so you can see how using that sort of conditional logic, we can present a better experience for visitors, but it also meant that we had to come up with and define as part of the design process what each of those steps was going to be. An online application is a pretty big form, so we ended up with all these different states as part of our design process. In terms of the implementation, what we did to build out the form, instead of writing a bunch of custom code to process all this stuff and kind of invent some of the features, the work centered around mapping the fields of data that we were collecting into the DataTel colleague database, so that we made sure that we had the correct technical specs around the required fields and the validation that was going to take place. We built the CSS and JavaScript we needed to style and enable the form elements so we could make it all work the way it needed to work, taking advantage of the features of the FormStack platform in the process. And then we created the application form steps in the tool, which is not a technical task. It's really kind of a content editor task. But since we were tying it in with a lot of other functionality, we were able to do some customization to it. And then created that custom theme within the tool so that we can inherit the look and feel of the website and kind of maintain that branding that we've talked about. So we ended up with something that looks like this. If you want to go out to berkshirecc.edu, you can apply now and walk through the experience of this online experience that was a significant upgrade from the paper experience, the PDF experience. It works on mobile. It's divided up into a lot of small steps so that it's friendly. The language that's used is friendly and kind of easy to digest for someone who's going to go through the process. And then on the back end, the nice thing about the platform is we inherited FormStack's dashboard so that we were able to use all those tools, all these features that are part of the tool. We didn't have to build these from scratch. And it's a really rich set of things to not only let us create the form and view the submissions, but create additional forms, look at the analytics, make changes to the theme. Content editors and kind of the owners of this form can make changes to values that appear in drop-down lists and things like that without requiring a developer to help us do that. And the functionality that we have here is something we would have had to build if we went the custom web form route. So there's a really rich set of things that we were able to inherit as part of the project. So the early impact, this is something that launched in August of this year, was 481 conversions or applications in the first 3 months, with a 21% conversion rate for folks who entered the form. So we really don't have any information about conversion rate with the PDF, but now we've got some real data that we can use moving forward to refine the form and make sure folks who start it are most likely to complete it, and take a look at those trouble spots within the form, since there are a number of steps where people may drop off, and do what we can to improve that so that Berkshire can increase the applications that they receive from folks who get to the form. And then on the new website, there are calls to action, of course, to the form in the key places where folks might be interested in applying. Then as a sidebar, there are some additional forms created that can inherit the theme and the style. So request information, schedule a tour. It's easy to imagine the typical calls to action we have in higher education that could be built out, using the same tool instead of a path that we may have selected, which would have been custom web forms for each of those. So it's been a really good positive impact and a great start for Berkshire. And I'm going to let Chris talk a little bit about another example at the University of Nevada, Reno.
Yeah, so University of Nevada, Reno, customer of ours, and they had a couple different problems as they were trying to scale their kind of form solution. The first one was it wasn't scalable. They had data in a bunch of different locations, and I think you see that across a lot of different higher ed organizations, right? You've got legacy systems like you were talking about, Greg. You've got PDF systems, you've got custom form built systems, and UNR really had the same problem. They had systems that weren't integrated, so they were sending data to multiple places. They were trying to use Salesforce, but it wasn't integrated there. They had PDF forms, they had other custom forms, but then they also didn't have integration. So you talk about whether it's payments or CMS or CRM or other integrations, they didn't have any of that. And so they were really trying to figure out how do we build a solution that can help us around our main goal. And the main goal was really around how do we use it to increase enrollment, right? And so what they were trying to do was trying to create a branded form experience that got people to one of their more highly publicized programs for recruitment, and then how do we increase enrollment was their main goal. So the UNR directed users from kind of the main admission page into a branded FormStack form that let them sign up for a campus visit. And really that campus visit or that experience was one that was kind of, as you listen to kind of UNR tell it, we've got a video on our website. If you go to formstack.com/UNR, there's a case study. In that video, they talk about they were able to, where they used to have somebody who would send an inquiry and they'd have to send them a paper form. They would fill that paper form out and they'd write a check to schedule a campus visit, send that back in. Really what they created was a 24/7 kind of experience where anybody could come on at any time, sign up for a campus visit, pay right there on that online form that integrated with their backend systems, and that closed that loop. And so some of the results that they saw was they increased their Nevada-bound attendance by 45%. And their Nevada-bound program it's their main recruiting tool to get people on campus. And the thing that UNR knows is they're strategically located near Lake Tahoe. They've got a beautiful campus, and they know once they get people on campus, they can sell them the vision of what UNR is. They just needed a better online experience to do that, and they were able to incorporate FormStack to do that. The other kind of key component, so we talked about enrollment, was they were able to go from 700, increase their enrollment from 700 to 1,180 in about 3 years. So once they switched to FormStack. And it was really around those three big things. They created a really branded experience. They integrated it with their current systems. They put everybody into a Salesforce flow that allowed their admissions folks to start following up and targeted campaigns. And then finally, they were able to focus on the marketing efforts, right? Greg, you talked about once you take the technology piece away, once you say we don't have to hand code these, we don't have to figure out how do we integrate our legacy systems, it really freed them off to say what's the most important thing, and the most important thing was driving people to the website, getting them signed up, and getting them on campus, and that's really what they were able to focus on, and that's why you see that 45% increase in the Nevada Bound program, and then you see the enrollment figures rise. And so those are the two big impactful numbers that they were able to see using FormStack.
All right. So we're near the end of our time here and ready for some questions with some takeaways from what we wanted to cover today and what we wanted you to get out of this session. The first is that technology piece. So web forms are really a core component of the web infrastructure. So as I go through these projects with our clients, sometimes it is something that's overlooked, or the technical challenges around forms and the fact that we have something that already works with these other systems, a sort of a barrier that's really addressing this. But those web forms are the conversions, right? Those are really the key things that we're trying to drive some of our primary audiences and prospective students among those to on our website. And so, the content management system is always kind of the big elephant in the room in terms of the technology, but forms are an important part of that, and they're not always, and often are not, part of that CMS. So we talked about the three primary paths for implementing forms and how higher ed is tackling these. And those are the CMS-based form tools, which have some limitations, but they're built into the CMS. Custom web forms, which kind of allow you to do anything you want, provided you have the resources to do it. And then the best-of-breed third-party tools that we talked about, like FormStack, that allow you to build on a platform, inherit some functionality, and focus on some of the branding and the conversion opportunities that we talked about here today. So the couple examples we showed you really gave us highly customized and highly usable solutions for our audiences that are also really usable for the owners, the folks who manage this stuff. So we hope we've given you some ideas around what's possible and what folks are doing as they tackle forms and things that you can carry forward. So with that, I will welcome Mallory back in, and we can spend a little time on some questions.
Hello. That was a great session, guys, and some really awesome information. I've been tweeting away. And I do have a number of questions to cover, and they're actually still coming in. So folks, don't forget, you can tweet or send those questions in through the GoToWebinar control panel, and I can see we're getting a whole bunch of them. So I'm just going to start at the top. Chris, I'd love to shoot this question your way. Is there some rule of thumb to guide design when a one-page form might be better than a multiple-page form?
I don't think that there is and Greg, you guys may actually have some kind of user experience testing around it. We've not seen kind of hard and fast rules. I think, though there are two things to think about, right? I think anything over probably like 10-ish questions where you're asking a lot of questions, and if you're not using, Greg mentioned conditional logic, right? Conditional logic is a way to kind of show and hide fields based on kind of how people respond. If you're not using conditional logic and you want to show a lot of questions kind of over 10, I would say probably a good rule of thumb. Start to look at a multi-page form. I think the other thing with multi-page forms to really remember is indicators, so progress indicators. Where am I on the form? How many questions do I have left? Are huge when you create multiple page forms, because the anticipation of not knowing how much I have left is a huge hindrance to getting more inquiries or getting more conversions. And so if you are going to create a multi-page form, really it's around how do you set expectations for somebody. So if you say it's going to take 5 minutes of their time, make sure it takes 5 minutes. If you say it's going to take 20 minutes, be realistic on that, but also give progress indicators. And I think those are kind of important takeaways when thinking about multi-page versus single-page forms. And the other thing, remember mobile, right? Mobile, long forms on mobile, hugely different than on the web, right? If you think about an email, a normal email, if you think about scrolling on a form, looks incredibly long when you're on your form. I mean, it really maybe only be 2 paragraphs. And so that's another important thing to remember when you're creating forms. Remember mobile, and remember who's experiencing that on the mobile device.
Awesome. Chris, this is another question for you from Elizabeth, wondering if people can call up past FormStack forms and make minor adjustments or a minor change, and then republish as a new form.
Yeah, so it depends on kind of how you're using the form. But if you embed it, I talked about kind of the experience of using an embedded form. We use JavaScript embeds, and so once you make a form within form, or make a change within FormStack, that change goes live automatically. And same if you're using a hosted URL link, that change is automatic. So Greg, you talk about, if you have to make a change here, then you have to go to multiple places to go make that change on a custom form. That in FormStack or other hosted solutions, that's kind of real time, and so you don't have to go out and update 3 different kind of pages or anything like that.
Sure. And another one for you, Chris. Cindy's wondering how FormStack integrates its data to the back end. Is it custom code, a CVS export?
Say that again.
Cindy's wondering, she asked, how does FormStack integrate its data to the back end? Is it through custom code, a CVS export, something else?
So I guess it kind of depends on the integration. So on our back end, it's all kind of real-time data that you're seeing. So somebody gives a submission, submits a form, you see that kind of real-time as it happens. With integrations like CRM or payments or other things like that, you kind of map fields to the payment provider, to the CRM system. And again, we use we've built the integration using APIs, and so the 2 systems talk to each other, and we'll push that data once the form is submitted in almost real time. So I think that answered the question. If not,
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it did. If not, I'm sure Cindy can follow up with another question.
Yeah,
all right,
definitely.
Anthony's wondering, with FormStack or other purpose-built form tools, are you usually able to integrate with Google Analytics to trigger goals based on events so you can track end-to-end, for example, like an email or an ad all the way through conversion?
So we do have a Google Analytics plugin. We've built a kind of a version 1 of that Google Analytics plugin right now. It can kind of tell you traffic data. We're working on more segmented data and kind of the that path data that you're talking about. So that should be happening this year or this next coming year with that integration.
All right, and let's see. I have so many questions. It's just a matter of picking which one I want to ask next. So Randy's asked a few questions. She's wondering, what kind of output does FormStack offer for example, it sounds like Randy is tasked with taking a look at the forms and looking at the conversion rates and the different metrics. So, he might want to provide that to an admissions office, and he's given an example that another form platform that he uses sends just a really raw email with data. It's not pretty, and there's a lot of work that's involved with making it readable for an entire group of people who might not be as savvy with understanding these type of metrics. So Chris, if you can talk a little bit to how that reporting looks with FormStack, that would be great.
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways. So you can export kind of raw CSV files out, and you can kind of slice and dice data that way. We also have a data or kind of a report section, so you can build custom reports based on form fields. So how many people have filled out attending the event versus not attending the event, or how many people if you have a survey, you can kind of slice and dice, and you can build charts and graphs and things like that. So we do have a reporting section. The other nice thing is that we have the sharing capability, and so you can share reports via a link to a group of people. So if you have an executive team or you have a management team or whatever that you want to send those reports to, once you build those reports within FormStack, you can actually send them a URL. They can see it. They don't have to log in to the FormStack application. They don't need a login or anything like that. You can just share that URL with them.
And if someone was looking to sort that data, around like people from a certain zip code or a certain location, does FormStack have that capability?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of filtering, and we have sorting within the submissions or the submissions table on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some probably things. It just depends on how granular, and I don't want to get too into the details, but yeah,
sure.
you can sort and filter fields within that back end, and then run reports off of those. So there may be some granular things that you're not able to do, but we have kind of high level things that you can do there.
Sure. Bill is wondering if the integration from FormStack into Colleague or Ellucian is a native component of FormStack.
So we do not have those native in FormStack. I think, Greg, I'm not sure if you guys have built some of those on your own.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that, I mean, we've done these imports or into DataTel using a file format and a tool that comes with DataTel. And so the challenge there, or the task, you know, from a technical standpoint, involves writing out the data that comes into FormStack into that format so that you can then run this process to import it into DataTel. And in my experience with this on a couple of projects, we usually want that extra step where we can be sure that this data that we're bringing in into the system is, you know, not going to be in duplicate. We don't want to have errors with that DataTel import, because DataTel has a tool that'll run it. And so that's where having kind of this intermediate step where we can review records in FormStack and then send them on to DataTel is helpful. But it needs to be in that DataTel format. So that's how we've done it. The other thing I'll add to this that was maybe relevant to an earlier question too, is the API that FormStack has, which we haven't used, but we have talked about the possibility of connecting to FormStack to then get the data out for specialized things like you know, DataTel or other integrations that need to happen. And the nice thing that we like about that, and that our development team likes, is that we still can inherit all this functionality of FormStack, and so that customization is really, it truly is on the back end, where, you know, a piece of software can connect to the FormStack API and pull data that way instead of exporting it out of the FormStack tool. So there are a few different options there, the more technical, but we haven't used them all ourselves.
Chris, did you see that I sent you a little clarification on the Colleague integration question?
What's that?
Oh, sorry. So I chatted you a little clarification on the Colleague integration question, but let me read it out. So Bill was saying that you know, he's wondering if you need to create your own APIs, or, you know, basically, did it take custom work, or would it have worked out of the box to integrate with Colleague?
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's always going to take a little bit of custom work, because there isn't something in FormStack that'll just export straight to DataTel. And DataTel, as I understand it, has the process that requires a certain format of data to pull in. At least that's the way we've done those integrations. So the customization is to write the data that you want to import into DataTel into that format, and then run the process on the DataTel side, because it's more like a pull from DataTel than it is a push from FormStack.
Yeah, I'm not entirely familiar with DataTel, but yeah, we do not have something out of the box like we do with Salesforce or other kind of integrations, and so that there would be a need to be a step. And we do have API, and I was going to mention we do also have webhooks. So webhooks is kind of an easier process. So there's multiple ways to get that data out. It just kind of depends on kind of that third-party service, like you're talking about. If there's that step that you need to write another piece of code onto.
All right, I just want to do a quick time check, because we are at the top of the hour. But Greg, Chris, and I aren't going anywhere. We're going to stay here and answer your questions, and we still do have a number of them. So if you can stick around with us, especially if you've asked a question, we're not going to leave until they're answered, we promise, but we do understand that some folks probably have to go. So I do want to remind you that when you exit this survey, there will be a very short post-webinar survey for you when you log out of the webinar. Sorry about that. So your feedback is really valuable to us. This is the first time we've done this webinar, and so it's going to help us know if we should do similar ones in the future, and it gives Greg and Chris an idea of how they did and if today's webinar met your expectations. So when you do have to leave, please make sure your pop-up blocker is off so that you can fill out that short survey. That's the only public service announcement that I've got for now. And so if you do have to leave, thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. But we're going to keep plugging through questions. So thanks to all of you who are going to stay. So our next question is also from Bill. So he notes that it appears that FormStack has workflows and you know that college users are authenticated. But do you also require, Chris, external users, let's say an applicant or somebody filling out the form, to create a username in order to submit the form?
So we do not. We do not currently require that or have that kind of capability. Right now, you can put a form on your website. User can come in and fill that information. There's no need for somebody to create an account and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some services where people really want that. There are some services that people hate that because it's another password for your end user. But so at this moment, no, we don't.
Mm-hmm. So Greg, here's a question for you, because you walked us through those 3 different options at the beginning to form solutions. And one of our questions is around the level of expertise that's required to really manage a form and create and maintain them each year. So perhaps you could give that answer from the perspective of each of those different form solutions.
Yeah, I mean, your mileage is certainly going to vary, you know, within each one because there are different options. But with a CMS-based web form tool, you know, my experience with those is that they generally tend to be relatively simple forms. They're going to be in your content management system, so they tend to be one-page forms that don't have conditional logic, and send an email and then log some data to a database. So if those are sort of the requirements that you have and you have a tool that meets those, then it can work and provide you with a place where a content editor and not necessarily a programmer can make changes to those forms to kind of maintain them over time. With the custom web forms, my experience is that you usually need a developer to make changes to those, especially to more complex forms. So say that an online application like the one that we developed at Berkshire, with having multiple steps to the form and dependencies with these conditional questions that ask a different question based on the answer to a previous one, as you can imagine, if you change some of those things, you're really changing the logic of the form. And in a custom scenario, that can get pretty complex. And so those sorts of situations are the ones where I see having a web developer, or when you had a web developer and that person leaves, you can have this real gap with maintaining these things, because with a custom solution you can build anything you want, but you need to have the resource to help do that for you. And with a third-party tool, something like FormStack, you've got an environment and support kind of with the tool itself, and that gives you some insurance against changes where people move in and out of the project. And certainly you have this dashboard like I showed a screenshot of, where you log in and create and manage all these things. So it's a web interface, just like your web interface, for Google Analytics, or your webmail or something else, where it's a pretty relatively low-tech situation and can be maintained without more technical resource. So within each of those 3, there's obviously some variability, and the forms you're kind of trying to create are variable, but our clients have some different experiences with maintaining forms across those 3 types of solutions.
Thanks, Greg. And another question for you. Do you suggest embedding third-party forms onto web pages or linking off to them?
Well, I think from a branding standpoint, it's nice to embed them. And so the main reasons not to are, sometimes when we have a site that is responsive or is not responsive, or a form that doesn't fit with whatever we're trying to do, we need to take that into account, because we've certainly all seen situations where there's an iframe or something embedded in a page, and then on a different device, it really doesn't look right, it doesn't fit, something gets cut off. So it kind of depends on what your starting point is with those. But my preference is to embed them when you can, because it allows you to kind of keep your branding and your visitor stays in one place.
Yeah, that responsive, I was just going to chime in real quick, Greg. That responsive situation is huge, and just one of the things that we built for is responsive forms. So it's always critical, as I talked about, kind of the length of form on mobile, thinking about, well, do I embed or do, excuse me, do I link? Responsive is a huge variable to take into consideration, and one of the things that we've kind of built for as well.
Great. Let's see what's next. Someone's wondering if you are able to collect FERPA-related sensitive information with secure forms on FormStack. Chris?
Yeah, so was it HIPAA-related? Is that what you said?
FERPA?
Or just sensitive? Oh,
yeah.
So some of these are a bit tricky for us. So one of the things that we tell people is we give a lot of the tools to be compliant in a lot of situations. So we're one of the, I think we are the only 508 compliant form builder out there. So we have a lot of the accessibility taken care of. From a security standpoint, we have the ability to SSL encrypt your form, so you have an SSL secure form when you link off to that form. We also encrypt the database, and so the encryption that we have, once you set a password, we actually don't even have access to it. So around a lot of the compliance issues, we say we give you a lot of the tools. Now again, how people take that data out of our system and how they use it within their own system is kind of out of our control, and so we give a lot of the tools. We are not compliant on, we don't have any kind of certifications on those, but we give a lot of those tools. So it's a bit of a tricky question, or tricky answer for some of those things, because we provide a lot of security layers within the form builder. So that's, and I'm not trying to hedge there, but that's kind of why I say have that answer.
Mm-hmm. Are you also WCAG 2.0 in addition to Section 508 compliant?
I believe we are. I'd have to get back to you, but I believe we are, yes.
Sure. I think Janie, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry, Janie, if I'm not. But perhaps you could just chat me your email address, and I'll shoot that over to Chris, and then we can follow up with you individually on that. All right, the next question. Chris, you mentioned collecting payments. Does FormStack comply with PCI standards?
Again, this is one of those PCI compliance. We're actually looking at what does it take to become PCI compliant. We actually don't store any of the data. So when we pass our payment integrations or pass our payments through to the integrations, we're actually not storing that payment piece. We're passing it off to the vendor. So we integrate with Auth.net, First Data, PayPal, and those companies are PCI compliant. And that's where and again, it's not trying to hedge, but it is one of those things that the way that we pass information is all secure, though we are looking at becoming PCI compliant, because there are some organizations who just require that out of vendors. Mm-hmm. So we're actually looking at what does that take. But right now we are not officially certified, though all of our integrations run kind of through the security process through PCI compliant vendors. So that's, mm-hmm. Again, that's another kind of just weird situation that we're in. Because we're often the middleman, right? Because we pass right. That data back and forth. We're not storing any of that. We're not housing some of
that. So just to confirm, the content is not on your server.
Right. The payment piece is not on our server. We're not storing that payment piece.
Got it. So Elizabeth noted that teams are probably dropping off of Facebook. So are there any plans at FormStack to use Twitter or Instagram autofills? I don't even know if that's possible, to be honest, but maybe you do, Chris.
So with our social autofill, we have Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google. I don't believe that we can do it. I'm not sure on Instagram. I don't think we have. Mm-hmm. We don't have that. I'm not sure what the capabilities are around Instagram, quite honestly. So I'd have to look at and talk to our dev team on what that actually means. Mm-hmm.
All right. So here's a couple really interesting questions. So Jason's wondering, what was the time frame of the enrollment increase in the case study example? And And then I've got a few more follow-up questions once you answer that.
So it was over, I think it was a 3-year time period where they implemented FormStack, and then honestly, I'd have to look at the case study that we have on our website. I think it was up until last year, because we did the case study at the beginning or middle of this year, and so we went out there and shot a video. So I could look at that a little bit more closely.
Sure. So on the application example, does the form keep the data of the person if they didn't complete the form? So I think what Jason is thinking is, if somebody only goes halfway, would someone on the institution side be able to contact them, kind of prod them to complete that form? And do the forms save the data so that a user could come back and finish it later?
So go ahead,
Chris.
No, go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say that it does save the data and I think, Chris, it's on the same device. I mean, we don't have a login, so we don't have a way of following a user, but if you use the same browser and come back to it, then that data is saved.
Yeah, so we have a save and resume link. So if you create a multi-page form, you can create a save and resume, so somebody can hit on or click on that. It'll give the user a link that they can come back to and fill out where they left off. It's funny, I was smiling because we do get that request a lot of kind of auto-capturing form information. There's just there's a myriad of kind of privacy issues that we've kind of worked through on that angle. It is something that we're looking to test, but again, we've got to figure out what are the privacy concerns from the end user perspective, right? And what are the guarantees that we have to give to that end user as if we were to store that data somehow.
So I have to let you guys know that somebody just sent me a message through the control panel saying that they haven't seen a radiator in years. So if you caught me just nearly burst out laughing, it's because of this guy right here in the background.
That's awesome.
When you broadcast from your living room, you get really fun things like radiators in the background. Thanks, Phil. I really needed that laugh. All right, onward. We still have a number of questions to go through. Alan's wondering, what about forms that require follow-up steps, like multiple approvals from different areas? Is that a capability that FormStack has? And so in his case, they have an intervention form where a professor can notify a support group if the student is failing. And this creates a multi-step contact and approval process from person 1 to 2 to 3. So he's curious if, FormStack provides that multi-step workflow to track connections with an entry.
So we do. We have a lightweight approval workflow, so you can turn approvals on, and so you can approve and deny submissions within FormStack. It's not overly robust, so approval workflows is one of those things like Greg talking about kind of custom form solutions. We have lightweight approval, but it's probably not like 3 or 4 steps along the way. It's, somebody comes in, they say approve or deny a submission, yes or no. It's not. It won't route multiple different ways. So that's one of those things that we do it in a lightweight format. Again, it's one of those versions that we kind of built out the initial kind of functionality. As we see people adopt it more and get more feedback, we'll probably add on to that functionality.
Got it. Now, can you speak to solutions for the user's view? So I'm a student. I'm starting to fill out a form, and I'm making my way through. I fill out the form, and then it gets sent off to the institution. And as we were just talking about these approvals, maybe there is a multi-step process. One of our attendees, of course, is thinking about the potential phone calls that student might start making to staff members to ask about the status of the form and if it's been approved and this and that. So can that student, that form user, see the approval process? And then on the flip side, do the approvers see the approval process when it's their turn or where maybe somebody 2 steps ahead of them, they're still waiting on that approval?
So we do not give access on the end user side, so they can't see kind of where things are in the process. But again, this is probably one of those situations where you probably want to look at how do we integrate with a current system that we've got in our current kind of stable of technologies, right? Because where we're really good is on the intake side, and on the integration side, and kind of providing a lot of that back end functionality. We don't show kind of the end user, because there's not somebody asked about the login feature, right? We're not storing that end user data other than cooking if it's a multi-page form. So we won't give access to that end user once they kind of are off the form and submit. We won't give them any access. There are ways that you can use kind of, we have things like confirmation emails and things like that, where you can send confirmation emails. You can say, hey, we received your information. You can auto-populate that with form fields. If they, if you say, hey, we received your submission, we also received your payment for $375, you can fill all that information out to the confirmation email, so then they're at least being communicated with as soon as they submit the form. We also have some smart routing functionality that allows you to, based on how they answered the questions, you can route different confirmation emails, or you can route it to different people. So you can do a lot of that kind of functionality. There's just not that view into the process as you kind of put it.
Mm-hmm. In a case like Berkshire, were any concessions made to the usability, functionality, or design of the form due to, the nature of the form stack software? Or, Greg, were we able to, work with various design challenges with custom CSS and JS? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it was a concern we had going in. Are we going to, if we undertake this design process, are we going to come up with something that's going to be hard for us to do? And we were able to accomplish everything that we wanted to do. The only thing that I think impacted us is the progress indicator that Chris mentioned, that we wanted to have on the form to show the status. I think initially we wanted to place it, up higher on the page, and partly because we embedded the form into the website, it wasn't going to be possible for us to put that progress indicator, outside the kind of area that the form was embedded, up in the top right, which is where initially we thought that it might go. And so you'll see on the form that it's kind of centered at the bottom of the form. So that's a little bit of the type of kind of trade-off that we had to make. But part of that is because of the decision to embed the form. We couldn't put that progress indicator on a part of the screen real estate that wasn't part of the form, if that makes sense. But otherwise, the styling, we're actually really pleased and being able to style things the way we needed to, and then also maintain the responsive aspect of the form. So it worked out well overall.
Great. And I mean, I guess this is a question that people have to consider as they're going through the different pros and cons of each of those three form solutions. But Greg, I'm wondering if you could talk to, the differences between a tool like Adobe PDF, which is, quite inexpensive, versus, other third-party tools, and are there upsides or downsides of a tool like Adobe PDF? And if you don't have specific information on Adobe, certainly we understand, because just throwing this question out to you right now, but, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I haven't used the Adobe product, but we've used a few different, form tools, both inside content management systems. There's custom, web application forms, and then also FormStack and some of the other, kind of best-of-breed third-party tools. And I'd say that, for the most part, within a certain category, there'll be some features that are comparable, right? And, there's also cost and the resources and how you're going to manage this that you have to tangle with. So I think that making comparisons across, between those three different types of solutions are a little bit harder to do, because that's where you have these trade-offs. And so the slide where we talked about the key decision criteria, comes down to these like cost versus capabilities, and what sorts of things we're wanting to do, what sort of resources we have internally, and what sort of systems we're trying to work with. So comparing a custom web form to the FormStack solution like we did with Berkshire to figure out what the best choice was, we weren't really comparing apples to apples, because the custom solution, didn't come with anything. We were going to have to build it. FormStack
Mm-hmm.
did, and the question was, can we get it to do the things and look the way we want and integrate the way that we wanted to? So I think the bottom line is that it's easier to compare tools within one of those three areas than it is to compare them across the three. And that's why I think
Mm-hmm.
those key decision criteria are important, because you're not always comparing feature to feature, but you're comparing, hey, how are we going to solve the problem we have, the business problem,
Right.
and what are the solutions?
Yeah, goals before tools. Preach it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's wonderful. And we're about to wrap up because we don't have any more questions. I so appreciate everyone who stuck around for this additional 22 minutes of Q&A. And we really enjoyed all of the questions that you sent us. Thank you so much for a really engaging Q&A session. Chris, Greg, wonderful session. Thanks again. And just as a reminder for everyone attending that we are recording this and we will be uploading it and sending out that recorded link in a couple days. So keep an eye on your email. If you haven't gotten something by Friday, don't hesitate to shoot me an email and say, hey, Mallory, where's my recording? I'll send it off to you. So thanks, everybody. This was the last mStoner webinar for 2014, and we are in the process of planning our topics for 2015. So when you take that short exit survey on your way out of this webinar, don't hesitate. Just give us some suggestions about what you're looking for as far as complimentary webinars go in 2015, because we would love to take that into account. So thanks, everybody. Chris, Greg, wonderful job again. And we're looking forward to seeing you all next year with another round of really awesome webinars. Thanks, everybody, and bye-bye.